Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 23rd of January, and joining me on this reduced edition is assistant editor Steve Withers.
We deal in lead, friend.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
I've been offered a lot for my work, but never everything.
And welcome back, howdy, and I hope you've got your boots and you're ready for some line dancing.
This is Billy Bob Hinton.
Yeah, signing in. Not quite as good as 102.7, the whatever it was.
The Coyote.
Funnily
Mad Dog.
Funnily enough, the V8 engine is actually called the Coyote.
Yeah,
so for those that don't know, I might have joked last week about buying a Mustang and suffering the effects of jet lag, actually went and bought it. So I now own a 5-litre V8 Mustang, and I was just saying to Ed, I took a little run yesterday. I went a grand total of 20 miles, and a quarter of a tank disappeared.
Jesus.
So it's got a worse drink habit than Ed has at this moment.
Well, absolutely. I do hope that we do get to learn your CB handle quite soon as well, because
it's
that's
big blue. It was either going to be Cletus or Big Blue, and I just thought Cletus was a bit too redneck.
But it does look very, very smart, and I think obviously once it calms down a bit, I'm sure that you might be able to go at least 35 miles before you could claim a quarter of a tank. So it's one of those things. At least you get to say that you have. Yeah.
And of course, it's absolutely brand spanking new. It only had 50 miles on it, so the engine's still a bit tight. So once that gets run in, and I'm going to be doing 800 miles next week down to London and Birmingham and so on. So it should loosen up a bit, and if it loosens up a bit, I'm hoping. I mean, I won't get huge returns, but I'm hoping that the MPG improves slightly.
On 800 miles, that's about 20 tanks of gas by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's going to cost me a fortune. Anyway, never mind. And then I noticed what size the tyres were on the back, and then realised just how expensive they're going to be to replace. So I won't be using the line lock feature, Ed, at all. I can't afford to lose any tread.
Famous last words. We'll see how it goes. But it's more a case of with things like that, you don't. Well, not least because it's pretty much the biggest flag to any surviving traffic policeman going. You know, a bright blue 17-foot long car, which makes a noise like a small earthquake. Broadly speaking, you aren't. You know, it's more a case of the full knowledge that it, you know, it can do some quite interesting things rather than actually having to prove that day to day. You know, it's idiots like me in hot hatches that do that.
Yeah, and I've noticed that straight away. People are letting me out of junctions now, whereas in an Audi, no, that doesn't happen. But people are letting me out of junctions. They're giving me thumbs up at the traffic lights. You got kids coming up and taking photographs, and it was quite funny. I parked the car up last night, and there was a kid with his dad, and he's going, "Oh, Dad! Wow, look at that, a Mustang!" And his dad was more excited than he was, and he's, "Oh, can I take a photo?" So it's getting lots of positive attention at the minute, and I just hope that positive attention stays positive and not a key down the side of it.
I'm sure it will be fine. To be honest, it's not. It doesn't strike me as the sort of car that you'd do that to. I mean, if you'd bought, I don't know, a TT, you know, because that, I don't know, it doesn't strike me as the sort of thing that you'd go for it on. But you know, I don't. Maybe I have the I don't have my finger on the nation's pulse quite like I used to. So we'll see how it goes. But I don't think you'll have an issue personally.
Yeah, and obviously talking about blue cars, Ed, any sign of yours yet?
No, mine's currently still in Hamburg, along with 1,199 of its friends. I'm quite glad that you pointed out that there were some people, because obviously you'd been doing some research for the Mustang. There are a lot of very unhappy not Ford owners at the moment. It would appear that 1,200 car consignment includes a large quantity of Fiesta STs, a large quantity of Focus STs, Focus RSs, some of the high-spec Edges. Basically, most of the Fords that people actually want are currently going nowhere in Germany. So, that's pretty frustrating. But, yeah, I just buy more records, acknowledge the fact that, you know, at the very least, I'm not paying anything. Well, I've paid a refundable deposit. I don't actually have to pay anything until they hand me the keys. So it's the onus is on them. They're not earning any. They don't have any of my money at the moment, really. So it's fine.
I'm just looking out the window at the minute, and there's a bit of a yummy mummy on the other side of the road currently taking photographs of my car. Hopefully this will die down once it's been sat there for a few weeks and it becomes part of the scenery.
You also need to use my method of cleaning cars, because that will make it far less conspicuous.
Right, I think we need to move things on swiftly and get away from the car stuff, because we'll bore Steve to death because he's not a car person. Right, so let's move on. We have got some competitions this week, Steve, so tell us all about them.
This week we've got I Am Not a Serial Killer, which is the title of the film and not me making a statement. That's available on Blu-ray, and the competition runs to 27th of January. We've also got Anthropoid on Blu-ray, which is also available 27th of January. Both those films are currently available to read on the site, actually reviews of those films. We've also got AI, Artificial Intelligence, which is on Blu-ray again, and that runs to the 30th of January. And finally, one of my favourite films, The Towering Inferno, again on Blu-ray, and that competition runs to the 30th of January. All these competitions are open to eligible members resident in the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man.
Okay, and any previous winners?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Right, so let's move it on to hardware news. And a name coming back to the UK after a long absence, dual turntables, Ed. I remember these the first time around. Showing my age there.
Yes. This is a little bit of a bolt from the blue. If you were as sad as me, you'd have been dimly aware that dual had actually got up and running a couple of years ago, having sort of ceased to be. But yeah, it's still a bit of a surprise to find them. They are announcing their return to they have announced their return to the UK. They are clearly hoping to cash in on the ongoing sort of craze, boom, choose your words appropriately. And there are 3 models, and they are it's interesting. They look very much like dual turntables used to, if you go and have a look on Google, but they are apparently all new, and the pricing is all pretty competitive by all accounts. They're starting at £125, and moving up until £250. And there's a combination. Some of them are belt and some of them are direct drive. I don't quite know what to make of them. I mean, the killer is, choosing my words carefully, it probably is relatively clear that these are not necessarily all the company's own work. They will have an origin point from somewhere. So once we can start having a play about with them and see what that origin point might happen to be, we can start to make a considered opinion as to whether they sound any good. But if nothing else, it's another candidate in the affordable turntable category. It's broadening the choice, as I pointed out in the review of the Project Essential 3, which went up about a week ago. I don't think customers have honestly had this much choice of different manufacturers all producing affordable turntables since about 1987, 1988. So we truly have gone back to the future on this one. We'll, as I say, if you are absolutely determined to find out what they're like, do let us know, and I can see if we can schedule in a review for them.
Interestingly, that they have gone direct drive a couple of them, because they used to be almost exclusively belt driven.
Correct, but that being said, there were some direct drive duals. Essentially, direct drive got thoroughly discredited in Europe thanks to some sharp practice, shall we say, from some manufacturers who still exist. So I'm going to just stop there before I say anything that might be assumed to be litigious. But essentially, direct drive has some limitations if it is not done correctly. But by and large, by the mid-70s, the vast majority of manufacturers that were using it were doing it correctly. So those limitations didn't apply. But thanks to something approaching a smear campaign, it sort of became discredited. So a number of brands decided to sort of mix and match. But if the basis for these dual turntables is what I suspect it might be, the direct drive option is actually extremely good. So actually that could end up being the pick of the bunch, because it's proved to be a pretty impressive performer when we've looked at it in 2 other iterations so far.
Cool. So that's dual turntables coming back, and some interesting earphones as well, Ed, to talk about.
Yes, well, these are something of a. I have to admit to having a bit of a personal interest in these. This is a French company called Aedle, Aedle. And those of you with long memories might remember that we actually looked at a pair of Aedle headphones some years ago called the VK1, the Valkyrie. And it was one of the more sort of challenging reviews I've done for AVForums because, as we all know, AVForums television reviews are objective, down the line, measurement based exercises where we reach a considered conclusion based around a very fixed set of parameters for performance. Now, audio reviews will always be a bit more subjective than that. The Aedle was very, very subjective because in an absolutely objective sense, I couldn't say that they were better than some other £300 headphones that they were competing against. They were, however, one of the most beautiful and bespoke objects I'd ever encountered in any category at that relatively affordable price point. So the company has now produced a pair of earphones called the ODS-1, and they are just as exquisite. Each one of them feels like a little piece of jewelry. So it's going to be an interesting question as to if the company has also managed to generate something with, very, very competitive, hell, even class-leading performance. That's going to be a fantastic product on a purely personal level, even if it isn't the absolute best earphone you can buy at £330. It's going to be one of the most exquisite. So this is one of those points where, the same reason that, I wear a mechanical watch, it's undoubtedly nowhere near as accurate as the one that's built into my phone, but I derive a sense of satisfaction from owning it. So we've held off from earphone reviews for a bit, simply because they don't seem to be of massive interest to the readership. But again, if that's the sort of thing you'd like us to have a look at, do let us know, and I can factor it in accordingly. So see where it goes from there. But in the meantime, it's one of those exquisite, nice things that I'd look forward to having a look at some point in the future.
Cool, good stuff. And let's stay with you, because there's lots of hi-fi things to get through this week. Marantz as well. Sorry, Steve, we will come to you. I know you're going to get quite anxious not speaking for such a long time. But we'll come to you soon enough, so just wait. Marantz then, new high-end SACD player.
Yes, this is an interesting one because Marantz, almost unique to the Japanese sort of audio brands, has been moving ahead with UPnP streaming for a considerable length of time now, but they have decided that for their current flagship that they are sticking with a disc spinner. So the SA10 is a CD and SACD player. It's got digital inputs in the back, so you can attach other items to it, but its primary playback method is still by sticking a little silver disc in the front of it. And it's not inconsequentially priced either. The SA10 is £6,000. Well, £1 less, 5,999, and the accompanying PM10 amplifier is 6,999. And obviously that's not money you lose down the back of the sofa. It's interesting that Marantz hasn't contested this section of the market for a little bit of time now. It's always a bit confusing because the higher up a Marantz product is in the range, the lower the number. They go down rather than up. So 10 is one of the lowest numbers we've seen allocated to a product for some time. I mean, we've had 9s and 7s in the not too distant past, and obviously anytime they wheel out a 1, they are firmly in the not messing about. But this is a pretty serious statement of intent, and they clearly believe that at this elevated point of the market, physical disc format still has some considerable legs, but they've hedged their bets. As I say, you can also attach lesser digital sources to the back of it, so see where it goes. I will say that if you are interested in, well, specifically SACD playback, it's obviously a format that's its best years, if there ever were any best years, are probably behind it. But Marantz Marantz's implementation of SACD is still one of the very nicest I've ever listened to. So this is probably going to be a very, very sweet sounding unit. I have to be honest though, back in Edland, where I've got a great distaste for physical silver discs, it doesn't necessarily blow my frock up over much.
In terms of SACD discs, I mean, are they still publishing those, or did that finish a while ago?
It depends sort of in part to what genres of music you're listening to. If you are a classical music fan, it's still possible to buy a surprising amount of music in SACD. The classical record labels took the mastering equipment, ran with it, and they achieved some staggering results with it. For more normal or mainstream, not normal, mainstream choices of music, the choice in SACD is extremely limited, and I don't think there's been much in the way of new releases anytime recently. Also, if you actually have a look on Discogs, the price of some SACD back catalogue stuff makes vinyl look bargain basement. Some of it is unbelievably expensive.
Interestingly, Tidal have gone with MQA recently. Did you see that, Ed? Have you tested any of these out yet?
Yes, I have recorded a test video for you to have a look at of me discussing it. I have been playing about with it with a view. I promise, if I get a minute, I will update the existing Tidal review to reflect this. It's very, very interesting, not least because it works extremely well. But I mean, at the moment, I'm not using any actual MQA decoding. There's a DAC that's going through for review at the moment, which I've been using to test some of the masters with. And interestingly, one or two of the masters, I actually have the high-res download equivalent of them. So I've been able to do a bit of A/B testing. And you know what? It works. You are getting the same as what those downloads are. So as a proof of concept for packing and unpacking, MQA does do what it says on the tin. And further to that, this month's Not a Review piece that I do for AVForums is on MQA. It's building on from the interview I did at CES, building on from this Tidal news. It's telling you a bit more about the format, what you might need to use it, and I've then dusted off my crystal ball and trying to work out what its prospects are going forward. So yeah, it's an interesting one, not least because I don't know what situation. I don't. Have you got any other high res audio other than what you can now access via Tidal, Phil?
No.
So this is your first exposure to it as a concept.
It will be, yeah.
And the only reason that Withers doesn't say the same is because I loaned him, obviously it would be file sharing if he'd kept it. I loaned him a copy of Mark Knopfler 2496 some time ago. So for most people, this is going to be their first sort of meaningful exposure to greater than CD resolution, and they have, at all power to them, chosen a nice big spread of albums for you to do that. So there's bound to be something that's up your street, and there's bound to be something that you at least know quite well that you can make some meaningful comparisons to.
Yeah, there is a Google Docs document running around publicly at the minute which lists every single album that's on Tidal, mastered MQA. I'll see if I can find the link for that, because I think it was Mr. Hodge.
I've got it. I've bookmarked it. I can stick it in the comments.
If you stick it in the comments, then Ed, because Hodge sent me that a while back, and it was really quite interesting. A lot of albums in there I didn't even know that Tidal had. So yeah. We'll put that in the thread. Right, so let's move on, because Steve's getting impatient. I can hear him in the background rubbing his hands, and he's getting frustrated because he can't talk.
Oh, it's his hands he's rubbing, is it?
I think that's what he's rubbing. There's a sound in the background anyway, something being rubbed. Maybe it's his crystal balls. Right, so major differences, Steve, between an OLED and a QLED. Now, I know that most readers and listeners will know what the differences are, but quite disingenuous from Samsung to use the name, because when you see it written down, and I'm looking at the running order, they both look like the same word, basically. So there is that aspect, but there's also the aspect of, some might say, I'm not saying we're saying this, but some may say that Samsung are bigging themselves up in a battle against OLED because that's the only thing they can do at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, if you watched our coverage of CES, you'll have seen that Samsung's big news was the launch of their QLED range of TVs. And you're absolutely right, Phil. I'm sure if I was being cynical, I'd say that QLED looks an awful lot like OLED, apart from a little tiny line that makes the O into a Q. And initially, prior to the show, there was people thought, maybe they're going to have a new technology available. This is QLED going to be something different. It's not. This QLED are still LCD panels using LED backlights. The Q, if you ask Samsung what the Q is all about, that's related to quantum dot, which is a filter over the panel that gives you a wider color gamut, basically, and also other advantages in terms of viewing angles and brightness. But it is not a new technology. These are just the same old LCD, LED TVs that have been coming out for the last 5 or 6 years, with refinements. There are refinements, and their performance is different in certain respects, but it is not a new technology. And of course, OLED is a technology that has been predominantly championed by LG over the last 4 years. And that is it's not new, it's been around for a while now, but that is a very different technology. The big difference is that OLED is self-illuminating, and so each pixel illuminates itself when electricity is passed through it. Whereas on a QLED TV, it's an LCD panel with an LED backlight behind it that's passing light through the panel. So the difference is because OLED is self-emissive, you obviously, each pixel lights up. When you turn off the electricity to that pixel, it goes completely black. So you get those really, really deep blacks that OLED is famous for. Also, there's no afterglow, unlike plasma, so it genuinely goes black once you turn the power off to that pixel. Obviously, of course, also, because it's at a pixel level, you've got much greater precision and control because it's every single pixel. So effectively, if you think about local dimming, which is used on LCD, LED panels in order to create better black levels and give it a better performance in terms of contrast, they may have most recently we've seen TVs last year like the ZD9 that had over 600 local dimming zones. But if you think about it logically, because we're talking about a pixel level, an OLED 4K TV essentially has 8 million dimming zones. Every single tiny pixel is a dimming zone effectively. So it's a very, very different technology. There are benefits to OLED and there are benefits to QLED. In terms of OLED, obviously, as I say, the black levels, the viewing angles are very, very good. They deliver very accurate colors at lower brightness levels than any other TV can, and they are obviously super thin. We saw the wallpaper W7 that was launched at CES, so they can be incredibly thin. And it is an exciting technology. I really like it. I know that you like it. It's something the enthusiasts and maybe forums members are really keen on. It's great. In terms of QLED or LCD LED, not as great in terms of black levels, obviously, although they have got a lot better over the last few years. The VA panels have delivered some quite impressive native black levels.
I've got to say, Steve, sorry to interrupt you there, but the KS9500, I've had that for a couple of months now in my home. Now, it is a fouled backlight, but for an LCD LED TV, it really is impressive, black levels and so on. It's only when you go off axis that you start to see haloing and stuff around objects. But if you're sitting bang on the centre of the screen, it is an impressive picture, especially with Amazon HDR content like the Grand Tour. Some of the films that they've made where they're going across deserts and stuff, and you got the sun in the foreground and so on, and there's a real depth to the image, and so I guess what we're saying here is that there are differences, but the differences aren't as great as they used to be.
No, definitely.
And this is, I think, adds to the confusion for the general public because, on initial viewing and if they're stood in the right place, QLED and LED look really, really good these days.
Yeah, absolutely. The performance of LCD has come on in leaps and bounds over the last few years. If you're like a plasma owner who hasn't seen LCD in a few years, you'd be very surprised at how good the blacks are on these TVs now, how effective the local dimming can be. As you say, Phil, the big downside with the VA panel is the off-axis performance. Now, this is an area that Samsung say they've improved on. Thanks to quantum dot and also the pixel structure on their new panels. They're saying that the off-axis performance is a lot better on these VA panels than it was previously. I certainly, in terms of color accuracy, when I saw the TVs at their launch moving off-axis, it did seem to retain its color performance as you went off-axis. I still felt that the contrast performance did drop off as you moved off-axis, though, so that may not completely fix it.
But I think
OLED's still superior in that sense.
I think the positive thing there as well was that there wasn't any color shift as you moved off-axis with the new TVs, which is a big, big plus point. So yes, you lose a little bit in the contrast, but the color shift's no longer is as apparent as it is on other VA panels. Really quite impressive.
Yeah. Now the big advantage to LCD, LED, and QLED in particular, as far as Samsung are concerned, is that they can deliver a lot more brightness than so the OLED. Although this generation that's coming out this year have definitely improved. I mean, LG are talking about 1,000 nits in vivid mode, so that's not very accurate. But Panasonic was saying they could hit 800 nits in an accurate mode. So that's a lot brighter than the previous generation of OLED TV. So they're moving in the right direction. One of the big areas where LED LCD does have an advantage over OLED is in terms of its peak brightness. So with QLED, Samsung is saying that they can hit between 1,500 and 2,000 nits of peak brightness on their new TVs, particularly on the Q9, which is the flagship model. But all of them can hit at least 1,500, and also they can deliver over 100% of DCI P3 within Rec 2020, which means that they can hit what they call the peak color volume, if you like. It's the color gamut and also the peak brightness of the TV combined. It creates a three-dimensional graph, and they can deliver that full color volume for HDR content. And that's an advantage that LED LCD still does have over OLED. And yeah, I mean, we saw some demonstrations of the QLED TVs, and whilst I do think that the naming is a little bit disingenuous, I do feel that the performance certainly looked impressive in terms of peak brightness, in terms of color volume, in terms of off-axis performance. I mean, we'll actually see when we get them in for review. But yeah, it's not a new technology, but it's certainly Samsung are squeezing every last drop of performance they possibly can out of LCD. As you say, Phil, because obviously they haven't been investing in OLED, and there's no way they're going to use an LCD. There's no way they're going to use an LG OLED panel because of the animosity between the two companies. But we hopefully QLED is going to lead into something else, though. I think this might be the first step in something. I know they are working on what's called, nano LED panels. So each pixel is composed of tiny little red, green, and blue LEDs. And that's their ultimate end game, I think. If they can deliver that at a reasonable price, then that would obviously give you the incredible blacks of an OLED, but also the higher peak brightness of an LCD LED TV. So I think that's their end game. That's what QLED could have ultimately morphed into something genuinely new. But at the moment, it's just an LCD panel with an LED backlight.
Steve, do you think there's a bit of confusion out there as well, just because of the way OLED works in terms of its dynamic range and contrast, that when you put HDR content through, it's not really a matter of it lacking brightness. It's the fact that it has such a great dynamic range to start with that any addition to that doesn't stand out as much as it would on a LED LCD TV.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, because if you watch standard dynamic range content on an OLED, I mean, nothing else comes close to it in terms of contrast performance. You've got those absolute blacks, and then you've got, if you're talking SDR, 100 nits at least of peak brightness. It's absolutely amazing contrast performance. So when you move over to HDR, obviously it does lack the absolute top bright, say current generations, that last 200 nits of peak brightness. But it looks stunning anyway. And because it looks so good to start with, I don't think the jump in performance is quite as big as it is with an LCD television. Obviously, we'll find out again when we review the OLEDs this year, but one of the areas that OLED does struggle on is delivering detail just above black, because it kind of goes from on to off so fast, almost instantaneously. There was a problem sometimes with delivering fine detail in dark shadows just above black. Now, I know Panasonic have been working on that quite heavily. I'm sure LG have, and Sony as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether they fix that problem, where they've delivered more detail in shadows just above black.
I guess the only people that can probably master that is going to be Panasonic, Steve, just with the experience that they have coming from plasma and display technology that is already self-emissive. And they also have engineers who moved across from Pioneer, so going back to the days of the Kuro, black levels and just above black detail levels. If anybody's going to crack it, it's going to be Panasonic. And I've got to say that's genuinely one of the TVs I am really interested in seeing this year. I mean, we've seen the LGs. We kind of know what we're going to get from LG. It's more design led from them this year than anything revolutionary. But the fact that the Panasonic engineers have got their hands on a mass-produced panel now, and we're not talking like tens of thousands of pounds either to buy one. I'm genuinely interested to see how they get, because if anybody's going to hit pro-grade colour and just above black detail and all the rest of it, it's going to be Panasonic.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. There's no question that this is what I've been calling a semi-professional panel, because it is a consumer panel. But however, it does contain certain features like loading in your own 3D lookup tables that is aimed at the professional market. So this is a panel that can actually bridge both worlds to a certain degree. And having actually seen it, in some demonstrations, not on the show floor, but actually backroom demonstrations, and also stuff at Panasonic themselves in much better conditions, completely black conditions, for example, against a Sony professional grade OLED monitor, I can certainly say that they are definitely on the right track in terms of delivering, a near professional performance to a consumer panel, and I think that's very exciting.
You've done it now, Steve. You've said the word 3D.
Yeah, it is interesting you bring that up because when I've been in those demos as well, and looking at that Pro monitor, and then looking at the Panasonic, and it's not necessarily about resolution or anything like that. It's actually looking at the color cast across the whole screen compared to there was an LG, I think it was a E6 sitting next to it. It was disguised, but we could tell it was an E6. And their OLED, in terms of uniformity in terms of color, there was no cast to it, and it mimicked the professional monitor. And when you think that monitor is, what was it, 11 inches or 15 inches, and it's like 30-odd thousand, 40-odd thousand, compared to a TV that's only going to cost you a few thousand, staggering how close in terms of accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, there were tiny differences, but they certainly weren't 25 grand's worth of differences or however much it's going to cost and compare the two. It's very, very impressive. And like I say, I'm really interested to see just how, because one of the things that Panasonic is particularly good at is delivering color accuracy. No question that the DX902 was the most color accurate TV that we saw last year. And one of the areas where I feel that LG do struggle is their color accuracy, particularly their CMS, which just doesn't work properly, frankly. So I'd like to see LG improve that aspect of their performance this year, and I'd really like to see what Panasonic can do with that LG panel using all of their processing and technology inside.
And of course, we're forgetting about Sony, and we really shouldn't forget about Sony because, like Ed alluded to in last week's podcast, they've got their mojo back, and they're starting to do things that we expect from Sony, and in terms of engineering, in terms of colour performance and so on, Sony just quietly go about doing their business and are usually absolutely spot on in terms of their colour accuracy because in the majority of their TVs they don't include a CMS, so they have to be. Yeah,
they do. I mean, there is no CMS, but generally I find that once you've calibrated the grayscale, the colour accuracy is excellent, and not just in terms of the absolute colour accuracy, but also in terms of the tracking. So, I'm interested in this because, first of all, as Ed pointed out last week, there's some interesting tech going on in this TV in terms of the way it delivers its sound. It's got a striking design. It looked impressive on the show floor, and it's just an exciting-looking TV. So it's a little bit different from the competition. I like that fact. I'm not entirely sold on the fact that it's at an angle. I don't really like TVs that sit at an angle, but overall, in terms of the way it looks and performance-wise, and also motion handling, which is something that Sony do very well, I'm really excited in terms of seeing this TV as well. So there's quite a few. I mean, in terms of OLED, at least, there's an awful lot coming out this year from 4 different manufacturers. Let's not forget Philips have also got an OLED TV out this year as well. And so, I think OLED is really coming into its own in 2017 after basically being supported by a single manufacturer. Now, I appreciate that same manufacturer is making all the panels here, but to have more manufacturers on board with different models and different price points and different performance levels, I think is only good for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, like any panel, I mean, for LCD TVs, these manufacturers, they're only buying off 1 or 2 producers. Nobody produces their own stuff anymore, as far as I'm aware. I even think Samsung switched over. So they're buying it from 1 or 2 suppliers, and everything else is then their picture processing and picture engines and everything else that goes on. And that's exactly the same for OLED. They're buying the panel from LG Display, but then they're doing their own thing to it. So like Panasonic said, they're taking the filter off that LG has and putting their own filter onto the panel to get rid of the slight cast of magenta on the blacks.
It's interesting, Phil, that Sony said exactly the same thing, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. So they're doing the same thing. So yes, these panels are coming from LG Display, but there's no question that the electronics and everything driving the picture and the picture technology on top of that is from Panasonic and Sony at the minute, and it's their own recipe basically. So yes, it's using the panel, but don't get confused into thinking, well, it's just a rebadged LG TV. It's far, far from it. And like I say, with any LED LCD display, they're buying in panels and then doing exactly the same and adding their own electronics and their own thing to it. So yeah, it's not a rebadged LG. Okay, so that's the upcoming TVs. There's going to be an article about the differences between OLED and QLED. So Steve's going to put them up next week. There'll also be a video with that. Plus, we are putting up articles, preview articles for all the TVs that we saw on the CES show floor. So let me just get this straight, because we did mention this last week. We will not be discussing picture quality based on what was seen on the show floor. There's no picture assessment in these articles that we're putting up in the minute, but there are preview articles. They will discuss the technology that we know about that are in the panels at the moment, picture process and all that kind of thing. So if you're interested in these models, those will be up in the next week. So go and look for them in the TV forums. There will be threads linked to the articles. They won't appear on the homepage just yet. And once we get the models through for review, then we will fill those articles out into proper full reviews. So you can bookmark them and then come back to them once the reviews, we've had the TV through and it's been tested properly and so on. So nice and easy for you to keep track of what we're doing with TVs in the coming year. Right, so moving on, talking about the coming year, what new products are we most likely looking forward to? And the one that I was really looking forward to, and it looks like Steve, if we do a review, is going to have the pleasure, because it's just too big to get into my place, is the JVC Z1, Steve. And the reason I can't have it up here is because it's going to take about 2 or 3 people to set it up. So JVC are hopefully going to come along and do that for you.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, as a projector fan, the idea of a 4K, native 4K laser JVC projector, very exciting. And it'll also be my first chance to actually check out native 4K projection in my home cinema since the release of Ultra HD Blu-ray. So yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to as well, assuming we can get it in, set it up and actually do it, because it is about the size of a Volkswagen. So
yeah, and it's about 70 kilos as well, so that's quite,
it's not light.
Quite a heavy beast. Like I say, JVC gone a bit quiet on that one, so we will chase them up, and hopefully we'll have that review probably next month, hopefully. And they have new projectors coming as well, so we need to chase them up and find out about them. I'm looking forward to seeing them. They are just evolutionary products, the new HDR modes and so on, but it'd be interesting to see that they have nailed that now, that Sony, the Sony 550 now does that really well. So it'd be interesting to see if JVC can match that. Anything else you're looking forward to, Steve?
Apart from all the OLEDs that we've just been talking about, I guess I'm interested in, one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully at some point this year, is actually seeing Dolby Vision being implemented on a player, TV and disc as a complete ecosystem, because up to now we've obviously had streaming Dolby Vision, we've seen demonstrations of Dolby Vision, but up to now there's been no disc player, and there are players coming from certainly from LG, and also the Oppo is going to get upgraded in the spring for Dolby Vision, so that's interesting. Warner's and Universal and Lionsgate are supposed to be releasing discs this year, so that's interesting. And obviously quite a few TVs now support it. We've got Sony adding it to their TVs in the summer, and obviously LG already support Dolby Vision, so I think that'll be interesting. I'm quite looking forward to that. Otherwise, though, it's mostly the TVs. I'm really interested to see how QLED does perform once it comes in, because it certainly looked quite exciting in terms of demos that we saw at CES. And obviously, I'm really excited to see all these new OLEDs and see how people like Panasonic and how Sony have taken that LG panel and made it their own.
So yeah, we've got OLED and QLED, but also Nano is still a name being used by LG for their LED LCD TVs.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got to say, they look pretty good at CES. Obviously, it was only on the show floor. And we didn't see any LG LCD TVs last year because their emphasis was very much on OLED. So hopefully we'll get a chance to review at least one of these this year and see how they're doing in terms of, because obviously they use IPS panels and not the 8 panels, which pretty much everybody else uses now. So it'll be really interesting to see how that delivers in terms of performance, and also just to see an LG LCD TV for a change.
And are we going to make any bold predictions for what might be coming later in the year? Because obviously we have CES, which we've just had at the beginning of the year, kind of gives us a roadmap of where we're going. But there's also usually a mid-year release window for a lot of products, mainly around about IFA time. Yes,
generally we get 1 or 2 surprises at IFA. Although I'm struggling to think what could be in the pipeline right now that we haven't already seen that isn't going to take I mentioned a bit earlier about QLED could morph into something genuinely new, but I've got a feeling that's going to take a lot longer than 6 months. So I'm not sure we're going to see much in the way of big announcements. What I guess we could see come around about that time with CEDIA as well at the same time in September, hopefully, is a lot more in terms of native 4K projection, maybe more laser projection too would be cool. Certainly, we saw quite a few projectors at CES that are now, DLP is certainly coming into its own in terms of delivering a 4K image from a 1080p panel with flashing to create an 8 million pixel image. That looked pretty good. So I'm sure you'll be keen to get some of those in and see what they look like, actually with real content. But I'm just struggling to think of what could possibly be in the pipeline that would be, a big news revolution. Because obviously we've got all the manufacturers now doing OLED, apart from Samsung, of course.
I guess for me, Steve, the thing is with these shows and all the rest of it is you only get the flagship TVs, you only get the flagship sizes. So I would like to see smaller sizes when it comes to OLED. I think for it to get traction, there's not many people are going to go out and buy a 65-inch TV, because normally the other half will put the foot down when it comes to that. And when you think to the average size of a British living room or sitting room, that can be quite dominating, a 65-inch. So I guess for me, I like to see some smaller sizes in OLED, in the OLED category, and I think it needs that to gain a little bit more traction.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things about having a single supplier of the panels is that you are limited to the panel sizes that they'll provide you with. And LG Display make OLEDs in 3 sizes: 55, 65, and 77 inches. Now, Sony are doing 55 and 65 and 77 inches. Obviously, LG are, and at the moment, Panasonic have got the 65-inch model. But you're right, 55 inches for me, 65 is nice, but it is quite big, and the average living room is going to struggle to fit that in, even though it is incredibly thin, etc. 55 inches is certainly the sweet spot, I think, for most people who are looking to upgrade to a new TV. I think the average size of a TV has certainly increased over the last few years, and certainly as far as OLED goes, currently the smallest you can get is a 55-inch.
Okay, so that's TV tech that we're looking forward to in 2017. So let's move over to hi-fi, which hasn't changed in 100 years. It's very slow moving. In fact, most sales would outpace it. But are there interesting developments coming in 2017, Ed?
Well, it's all relative. You are right. We deal almost exclusively in mature technologies, and we also this is something you AV types want to look at. We don't massively piss off our client base by changing everything every 18 months, which means that our stuff has residual value. It means that manufacturers can put the time in to actually perfect technologies before moving on to the next one. But I digress. Early on in the year, products that I am genuinely looking forward to getting my hands on are the new name all-in-one units, the Unity Star, Atom, and Nova. The reason being, I make no bones about it, I'm a fan of the brand, but what I think is more important about these products is that they are one of the very first instances we'll see of a relatively bespoke high-end manufacturer has made a product which takes all the things that they believe in, passionately, but they've then given it a real sort of dose of, genuine real world ability. They are cast capable, they support multiple streaming services, they act both as UPnP servers, and they can also act as UPnP renderers. They are designed to just slot in to a home, an already semi-smart home, which is using other companies' technology and doing all sorts of sort of buzzword ideas and context, and then doing that in a very, very high quality way. And I'm hoping fervently that they've pulled it off, that it brings new sort of attributes to the performance, and that they are products that expand the appeal of audio beyond a given point. On a more geeky level, I am quite looking forward to there being a new range, and it genuinely is a complete new range of cartridges from Audio-Technica, because they have been for years and years and years one of perhaps 3 companies that you go to for affordable, by which I mean from about £20 upwards, phono cartridges. And they haven't changed this range in we were trying to work out, so yes, it's about 26 years. So this is quite a big deal changing. It certainly suggests that they have some faith that things are going to continue pretty much as they are. So I'm weirdly excited to have a look at those, and also to see if they still remain as heartbreakingly difficult to fit as their predecessors, because Audio-Technica seem to believe that as human beings we're all equipped with 3 arms. By which I mean actual one sticking out of our bodies rather than a tone arm.
I saw. I can't remember where I saw the picture now, but it was of a vinyl shop, in the vinyl section, and printed above the records all on display was the tagline: "Vinyl now threatening the future of MP3."
Yes, vinyl is killing the MP3 industry.
Yeah,
it's not, and I stand by my prediction. I've seen all the news stories coming out, and I've seen that there's a story popped into my inbox this morning about a new pressing plant coming online. We will see, I believe, a decline in 2017. It has to come to an end sooner or later. There are structural imbalances, the same as exist in a number of other systems, that have to be corrected sooner rather than later. But as I've said all along, if we have more people along for the ride at the end of this process than we had at the start, it's still a win, and I'm still very happy with how things have gone. Otherwise, the other product I'm looking forward to, and I don't mean to sound like I'm permanently retroing, I don't know if anyone else saw this, JBL, the speaker manufacturer, is celebrating, I believe, 70 years of home loudspeakers. And I'll stick a picture of this up in the comments, but they have released a limited edition loudspeaker for which it is forever 1974. There's a giant pair of wardrobe JBL loudspeakers. They are let's find the code for you, the 4312 SE, and they're just an absolute blast from the past. If I can find a way to cover them for AVForums, I will, because I genuinely think that they are just fabulous.
What's the wooden finish on them?
Oh, they're black ash, mate. Don't mess about.
Is it black ash? Is it? Oh wow.
Yeah, they are. They're not messing about. I'll stick it in the comments. You can judge for yourself. £2,300 a pair, and in limited quantities in April. And I am going to elbow my way to the front of the queue to let you readers and listeners know what it's like. One of my all-time unbelievable hi-fi moments was with a pair of JBL Everests about 10 years ago. I mean, they should have been good. They were £45,000 a pair. But in terms of just the sheer scale, effortless monster scale, very little gets close to those. They are unbelievable loudspeakers. You sort of tend to look at them and go, yeah, it's all a bit granddaddy, but there's a reason why they haven't messed about with the formula. So I'm delighted that they've made it to 70 years. I do hope that their new owners, Samsung, don't mess about with the formula. And as I say, I genuinely want to get my hands on a pair of those just to have a play about. So watch this space. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, a genuinely interesting speaker there. And Steve, you got some interesting and very large and heavy speakers turning up beginning of February.
Yes, Arundel are bringing around some what I can only describe as fairly substantial. Well, technically, I guess they're bookshelf stand speakers, but they're not. They're almost as big as my floor standers without the stand. So that's going to be interesting, just on a logistics level, getting them in, setting them up. That'd be fun. Different from the B&Ws at least. So that's a 5.1 system they're bringing around. I haven't gone 5.1 for a while. I've said this before, I'd rather have 5 great speakers than 11 indifferent ones.
Exactly. And I've got to say, the name of that company, Steve, reminds me of some kind of progressive rock band from the 70s.
I do hope that you're going to do a big flute solo at some point.
For some reason, annoyingly, and perhaps slightly pretentiously, it always makes me think of the Philip Larkin poem, An Arundel Tomb. But there you go.
I don't know, Steve, if you've seen it, Tidal, the entire Emerson, Lake and Palmer back catalogue is available in Tidal Masters, so you can play Tarkus on them at an unbelievably antisocial volume level, and you can test out the maxim that actually this is one that the listeners can participate in as well. I have never met a single woman or someone who identifies as a woman who likes prog. Not one. Not in 20 years of asking the question. I know women who are enormous fans of music. They like every other genre you can possibly imagine, but I have never met a single woman that likes prog rock. So if you know a woman that does, or
my wife likes prog rock, Ed.
Really?
Yeah.
Can we have independent verification to that? I think you're just lying.
No, I do questions. She generally has quite good musical taste, but she seems to occasionally drift off into prog rock. Which,
are you suggesting that prog rock is not good musical taste? Because you might be right.
I like a bit of prog occasionally, but I do struggle with some of the mid-70s peak period prog rock stuff. I mean, just the thought of Rick Wakeman in a wizard's hat and a cape playing endless solos on it.
Tales of Topographic Oceans. Do you know if you bring a copy of that for him to sign, he'll refuse? He'll sign anything else except, yes, Tales and Topographic Oceans. Yeah, I agree with you. Some of the early stuff, Gentle Giant, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a bit weird. It's like sort of, well, I do imagine that a busload of drugs were involved in it, but it's actually quite listenable. Some of the ELP stuff was a bit, a bit self-indulgent, or a lot self-indulgent.
Two of the ELMPs dropped dead last year. I should imagine the one remaining is getting a bit worried.
I don't know. Hopefully the year of death is over. Although that said, we lost Miguel Ferrier last night, didn't we?
Did we? Oh,
yeah.
We lost Gene Cernan, who was the last man to stand on the moon, which was very sad. As far as
so, in other words, the orgy of death continues.
Yeah, although these people that are dying are all quite old, in their 80s, so that's fair enough. I think it's the young deaths that are a bit more shocking.
Yes, agreed. Philip, we bored you to death.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it for hardware news. We're going to move swiftly on to movie news next. Right, so moving on. Films opening this Friday, Steve. What can I go and use my unlimited card on?
Well, I think this week you actually might use your unlimited card because we have some interesting films, one of which I know you're looking forward to. We've got Hacksaw Ridge, which is the new film directed by Mel Gibson. First time in the director's chair since Apocalypto over 10 years ago. And it's a true story of a guy called Desmond Doss, who was a conscientious objector, refused to fire a gun in World War II. So served as a medic in the Battle of Okinawa, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor for bravery despite never actually firing a weapon, which I think is the only person to have done that. Now, given this is Mel Gibson and given this is the Battle of Okinawa, the film is apparently very visceral, absolutely brutal in terms of its violence, but also very uplifting in terms of its message. So I'm quite looking forward to that because Gibson does violence well. If you've seen Apocalypto, you'll know he can do violence well.
He is now an honorary Scotsman because he is a drunk racist. So
he obviously he's had his issues in the past. This could be something of a return to form for him in terms of as a director, because I think he's a very talented director, and shame he doesn't make more films. Also, he owns a production company and studio, Icon. So even though no one in Hollywood will touch him on a barge pole, he can still do his own stuff. So that's coming out. I'm looking forward to that. It's coming out on Friday. We've also got Sing, which is the new animated musical from Illumination Entertainment, who do things like Despicable Me and Minions, which I'm sure will go down well with the kiddies. And big news this week, we got Trainspotting 2, which they're also calling T2, which could get confusing. It's not Terminator 2. Trainspotting 2 is opening on Friday. Got Danny Boyle, John Hodge.
To be fair, Steve, there is a good 20 years between both T2s, so I don't think people are going to get that confused.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's got everyone involved in the original film. He's involved in this. So behind the camera, Danny Boyle directing, John Hodge writing, and Andrew McDonald producing. And in front of the camera, obviously, we've got Ewan McGregor, and we've got Dorian Lee Miller, Ewan Bremner, and Robert Carlyle. So the whole team are back. And I'm definitely going to go and see this, partly because I really, really enjoyed Trainspotting, but also I'm just curious to see how they managed, what they do with it, because obviously 20 years is a long time. The world's a very different place now than what it was in 1996. And seeing how Renton and the gang deal with things like social media, designer drugs, and all the other things that have come along since then will be quite interesting. Yeah, totally. And the thing that everybody seems to forget about the original, and it's something I hope to really nail, and I have been looking for the OST online, and that is the music. Because the music is such a big part of the original Trainspotting. There was a lot of big groups in there got their big breaks, like Underworld, Ed. And
you had Pulp in there as well, and Pulp weren't very big at the time, and a lot of the what became Britpop, a lot of that stemmed from the Trainspotting soundtrack, as well as dance music, basically. I mean, Pearl's Girl and what was the other one that became the anthem from that?
Born Slippy.
Born Slippy. That became an instant anthem as well. So I've been looking for the OST and I haven't found it yet on any of the streaming services. So it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is in terms of music. The trailer music was really good. So it'll depend, I think, on the soundtrack as well, because the soundtrack really made the first film. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. One of the best cinema experiences I ever had was seeing Trainspotting back in Edinburgh, and yeah, I'll be going on opening day to that one.
Nice.
So you're going to finally use your card again since Rogue One.
Yeah, the good news is that the cinema will be free. Getting to the cinema will cost £87.
oh shit! I hadn't thought of that. Well, that's a 14 mile round trip, so that's a quarter of a tank just to go to the cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I hope the parking's free.
Well, it's parking spaces. Jesus, I went to Tesco's last night just to see. Well, I need to pick some stuff up, but also to see if I could fit it in one of the spaces. It's tight. It hangs.
Oh,
yeah. But the funny thing was the number of people that came up and wanted to talk about the car, and then when I was walking in and coming out again, there's people standing together talking, and they were all talking about the Mustang. So.
It really put me off wanting to get any kind of high performance car, because
Steve,
I don't want all the hassle.
Steve, you'll have that Audi A3 of yours, that little green terror,
the wheels
for a long time, because we've tried to push you, and we've tried to push you gently into getting a new car, and you've resisted, and I don't think you'll ever do it.
And besides, I've got to be honest, the Fiesta is unlikely to elicit the same. There are enough of those that it's not an issue.
But it's an absolute. It's not the fastest car on the road, but it is one of the best handling cars you could ever have. That little Fiesta ST, I absolutely adored it on the test drive. It was such great fun. You just throw it in any corner and it just gripped and gripped and gripped.
Presumably, you can't do that with a new car.
Well, it'll grip and grip and grip and grip, and then oversteer massively.
Yeah.
And then, as Phil points out, then you just get burned through your £250 a corner rear tyres.
The thing you have to watch as well is that it will go sideways in one direction, but what you have to watch for is the whiplash back in the opposite direction, which is usually the killer, and is usually the one that writes you off. And if you go on YouTube and you watch any Mustangs going out of control, it's not the first slide that gets them, because they usually are able to correct it. It's the snapping and the over-rotation the other way that gets them, which you won't get on a Fiesta ST. It's a little absolute dream hot hatch, that thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Steve, there was an important announcement made about Mustangs. Ford in the US is to recall all Mustangs built between 1993 and 2014 to correct a fault which causes the car to crash whenever a camera phone is pointed at it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable the number of people losing it on YouTube.
It's actually a YouTube category in itself. Mustangs crashing is pretty much there. Yeah,
I hope I don't crash.
Yeah, don't add yourself to that particular list.
No, I won't point a cell phone at it, to be fair. That'll help. But just try to make sure you're not being videoed, because you don't want to become a celebrity for all the wrong reasons.
No, you don't want that happening at all. Anyway, so let's just say it's raining, and I don't want to take the Mustang out in case I lose it.
You can't afford to take it out.
Yeah, it's not a car for driving in the snow or the wet. So it's raining, and I want to go and watch a Blu-ray. What's coming out this week?
We've got The Magnificent Seven, the remake from last year with Denzel Washington in the lead role, which is a pedestrian western that's fairly enjoyable. With some nice action sequences, but you do kind of ask the question, why do they bother? Although it does look great. The Ultra HD Blu-ray in particular looks stunning. So if you're looking for something, if you like westerns and you want something that looks good and it's quite good fun, then check that out. We've also got Blair Witch, which is the sequel / remake to the original Blair Witch, which actually got a half decent review from Shuna when it came out. I don't think Kaz was quite as impressed. Did sort of question why they bothered. Again, it's a bit like Magnificent Seven. At the moment, it seems like everything's getting remade or rebooted or whatever, because people seem to be bereft of ideas. And obviously, the original Blair Witch, half of its appeal was the fact it came out of nowhere and had that kind of, it was sort of started the whole found footage trend, which I could do without, to be honest. But anyway, that's out. We've also got Mr. Robot season 2 out on Blu-ray this week. Phil, I know you're watching it on Amazon, and obviously a lot of people have watched it on Amazon, including me. I've got to say I found the second season slightly disappointing. We also have Sherlock season 4 out on Blu-ray. And talking about disappointing, that was also
I've only seen the first one. I've still got 2 and 3 to go. But
the first one is the worst. I have to say the first
okay.
one is the worst of the 3 by a long way. But it was. I enjoyed the second one. The second one's great. Toby Jones is excellent in it, and that was a bit about basically you want to see Sherlock solving impossible crimes. That's the one that does that. The other two not so much. No. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed. If they don't make any more, to be honest, I won't be bothered.
It's just so self-indulgent and self-congratulatory.
And smug. It's so smug, isn't it?
Well, there was a story.
Stephen Moffat. You want to punch him sometimes. Don't you?
Well, there was a story saying that Cumberbatch and what's his face don't get on anyway. So it's and they're getting more and more strains on the diaries in terms of having to do feature films and that kind of thing. So I don't think there's going to be another. I think that's it. And seemingly it's quite final, or could be seen as quite final in the final episode. I haven't seen it yet, but it's not like it's final, but if you don't make any more, you wouldn't, it would be a suitable ending. Interesting, I read a great article saying if you want to watch Sherlock Holmes, a modern day Sherlock Holmes story that involves solving crimes and is fun, check out Johnny Lee Miller in Elementary. It's way better.
I was about to say this. It's wrong to make absolute comparisons because they are trying to do different things. But one of the things that, because of the length of time you go between these BBC episodes, it becomes abundantly clear that because the Elementary producers, they've got 20 episodes a year, sometimes slightly more, depending on how the seasons are being filmed and how they're released. They just don't have to compress so much stuff into an hour and a half. They can relax, they can run concepts. But Johnny Lee Miller is grossly underrated. I mean, he has won awards and he has done some, but you just give him something that he enjoys doing, and he's sensationally good. And I've been with Elementary from the first episode, first season, and I love it. It's not the same as Sherlock. Don't go into it and try and make direct comparisons. But for me, Miller does a better modern day interpretation of Conan Doyle's character than Cumberbatch does. If we accept as well that Cumberbatch is perhaps being hindered by one of the most self-congratulatory bellends writing his stuff.
Now you just sit on the fence there, Ed. You just sit on the fence. I have to admit, Doctor Who has not been a big part of my existence. But it's interesting that some of the comments that I have seen written about Moffat Doctor Who episodes apply just as...
They totally do, Ed. They totally do. And this is the last year Moffat's going to be running Doctor Who, and thank God for that. I'll be glad to see the back of him, because I am sick to death. He's not as clever as he thinks he is, and he's so bloody smug at the same time. I'll be glad to see the back of him. Yeah, also coming out this week, The Girl with All the Gifts, which is a zombie film that Kaz didn't review. Kaz is reviewing the disc, but I think it was Shruna reviewed it at the cinema and she really liked, and it does sound quite interesting, very low key with Paddy Considine in the lead role. Also got Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, a Sam Peckinpah movie, bit of a classic there. And finally Creepy, which is a Japanese, not exactly horror film, more of a sort of a thriller that again got quite good reviews when Shruna saw it at the cinema. Okay, and those are the normal Blu-rays, which we all know you don't take any interest in these days, Steve. So in terms of Ultra HD Blu-ray, has anything happened since last week? Not much, really. One announcement, which is that Allied, the new Robert Zemeckis film, is coming out on the 28th of February. And that's a 4K DI in Dolby Atmos, so that should be good. Okay. And also apparently quite a good film. Okay, good. Oh, well, that's something. Excellent. So something for you to spend money on, Steve. It's always a good thing. And having seen a small selection of your Blu-ray collection, my God, you give HMV a run for their money in terms of how many discs you have on shelves there. The whole room must just be discs. It's not the whole room, but it's certainly 2 walls. That's one wall you can see in that video, and on the other side is another wall. With this hidden porn vault as well. Yeah. It's ridiculous. And how many of those do you watch more than once? Well,
15%.
Probably.
I think 15%. I think is a bit high, to be honest. I think it'd be more likely 10% or lower. Anyway, we didn't discuss Rogue One on last week's podcast, coming back when we said we would, and this is going to be full of spoilers when we talk about it. In fact, it's gone so long now, I can't really be bothered to talk about Rogue One, to be honest with you. Are we going to spoil it for people? Yes, we are. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, you haven't seen the film yet and so on, this is the time for you to say goodbye to the podcast this week, and we'll see you again next week. And for those of you who are interested in the spoiler-filled review and discussion, then stay where you are. So, Steve, I'm not going to say I told you so, but I told you so. It was everything I wished for on a podcast back in, it might have been early December or even November, where I said, Disney need to be brave with this. They need to make it an action-packed film where they kill everybody off. And lo and behold, they kill everybody off. I was so happy at that. It was such a brave move to make, and one I think that pays off spectacularly.
It does, absolutely does. And like you, I was quite surprised at that first screening. When I suddenly began to, I think it was when the robot got killed, I thought, blimey, they actually are going to kill everyone, aren't they? And then they probably went and killed everyone. Yeah, but they could have saved them. They could have saved some of them at the end, and they could have appeared in another spin-off movie.
No, they couldn't. They couldn't have done that, because I think the whole thing with this was, and I think the reason why they nailed it and why I now have a newfound respect for A New Hope, not that I didn't respect it, but it just makes it a far better film now, is that you actually see the sacrifice and the brutality of the Empire, and just what they went through to get those plans for the Death Star, and the fact, and this is the absolute genius of the whole film, is you realise that porthole leading to the reactor was a deliberate flaw put there to help the rebellion. That was just absolute genius, and it just makes so much sense, and it fills in so many plot holes that did exist for A New Hope. For me, that's it. And I'm going to go to Ed, because I know Ed doesn't have a lot of time left on this podcast next. But for me, that just absolutely hit the nail on the head. And for the film to exist, it was always one of these. Well, do we need to have this film? I think that made it worthwhile, was the fact seeing that story, but also realizing that the guy that built the Death Star actually put a deliberate flaw in there for the rebellion to find through the plans. Genius, I thought.
Yes, in a piece of retconning, if that's what we're using as a phrase, it definitely was a smart thing to do, and it just tidies things up a little bit. I also agree that I think it was well judged. I think the deliberate decision to basically end the film 20 minutes ahead of the start of A New Hope was also a very solid thing to do. It's just refreshing in this day and age to watch a film being made to which they can tie everything up, because fundamentally, in terms of sequels, well, they made them some years ago. So that appealed to me. It's interesting talking about the Death Star modification, if you will, because one of the very few things that grates in that film for me, and I can't easily tell you why, is the presence of both Mads Mikkelsen and what's his chops?
Mendelsohn.
No. Oh God, the bloke who comes to rescue her at the beginning. I'm just having a massive brain fart about his name.
Oh, you mean Forrest Whitaker?
Forrest Whitaker. That's it. Ironically, having actual people, actual proper actors. Mads Mikkelsen is a great actor, and he turns in quite a pleasant, understated performance in that film, but it's still like going, oh look, there's Hannibal, and it's just weird. I couldn't tell you why that grated. And the same with Forrest Whitaker. It's like, oh yeah, okay, he's got some appendages and one of those sleep apnea masks, but he's still nonetheless, it's Forrest Whitaker. It just because actually I thought the rest of the cast turned in quite a nice little performance without necessarily being massive household names at the present. It was just weird to actually have a couple of I hesitate to use the word proper actors because that's a stupid thing to do. Actors who have put their name to famous characters before just seemed a bit weird, a bit disingenuous. I think in many ways they should have had the courage of their convictions and just gone with other less well-known people.
But do you think maybe Alec Guinness got the same reaction from some people who saw the original Star Wars? What is this grade A actor doing in this space opera?
I wouldn't know. I was an ovum, but
not even that. I think.
It's a funny one. I can't tell you exactly because it's a different period. I think it was Mads Mikkelsen in particular where I felt it was, because Mads has appeared in so many things that I do like a lot, and he just very, very briefly and through no fault of his own took me out of the film with his presence there.
There was just one...
As much as the sudden appearance of a dead Peter Cushing.
Well, now you see, I saw the film in 3D, and the effect was so awful, full stop, that a CGI Cushing just blended into the general blurriness and incomprehensibility.
I've got to say, even in 2D, it had some flaws, but at the same time, I thought it was very brave of them to try that, and it certainly didn't take me out of the experience. I thought it was well enough done not to take you out of the experience. There was a little bit of uncanny valley, but in terms of him, I thought the Princess Leia at the end was terrible. It really wasn't good at all. But in terms of him, it worked for more than it didn't work, if you know what I mean. And I think they had to have his character back there. I don't think it would have worked in just having his face reflecting of windows or the shots of the back of his head or whatever. He had to be an integral character in the film, so it was brave of them to do it. I congratulate them on doing it. It works in terms of the film. Like I say, Princess Leia at the end doesn't work, but you kind of forgive that because you've just seen probably the most awesome Vader scene ever to be committed to film just before that, so you kind of forgive it, really. And it kind of leads on to the only sort of plot hole that I could find in the whole thing, and that is the dialogue in A New Hope doesn't really make any sense if he knows it's that ship that's just taken off from his from the rebel ship, and then they've got to go and pursue it. Then the dialogue at the beginning of A New Hope doesn't really work when they're talking about.
Well, you could look at it two ways, because he obviously, when he at the beginning of Star Wars, knows that the plans are on that ship because he's just seen them be handed over, so he knows that. They don't necessarily know that he knows that. So they're all being brave and keeping to the story that they're just on a diplomatic mission. They don't have any plans.
Can I stick another plot hole in that case? If we're doing that, when they're in that city that eventually gets blown up by the test firing, the sort of
Jeddah City,
yeah. There's the bloke from Mos Eisley, the I don't like you, he doesn't like you either. So how did he get out of there before it blew up and got back to Mars?
Obviously it's a spaceport, so they could have just been heading to their ship and away again. So
that was jolly fortuitous,
it
wasn't
was.
it?
Not really, because they flew to Tatooine and then got his arm cut off. So it worked out.
Well, yes, arm versus being blown up.
The other one with Vader at the end, Steve, is one that I've seen discussed, is that there's more than one ship that looks like that. And during the battle you see 2 or 3 of them, so it could be that they're just going to each and every one of them. So that was another plot point. But anyway, I still think it's probably the best ending to a film I've seen in a long time. I mean, that whole Vader scene, I'm not going to... We'll leave some spoilers intact. That whole scene, though, that was just absolutely kick-ass Vader. That's what we want to see from a Star Wars film.
And can I also say, I alluded to this earlier on in the cycle of Rogue One, but I stand by my claim that the Empire lost the War of the Rebellion through incredibly poor health and safety procedures. I mean, let's look at that. Let's consider that library on Skerith for a second. It's like, when designing it, right, okay, what do we need, chaps? Well, we need a way to store an enormous amount of data. Oh, yeah, plenty of lethal drops. They will be very important when we design a library. That dish on the top. No, you can't align that from a control panel somewhere on the rest of the in the rest of the building. No, you've got that catwalk. Yeah, you just pop off out there to align the dish. It's just in the same way. It's like, do you think we ever need to disable the tractor beam on the Death Star? Well, we might, but I thought the best place we could do it is above another 600-foot drop. Oh! It makes me so angry. So impossibly angry.
Okay, Ed. I don't know where to go from that one. So I think there's loads to talk about Rogue One going into the future. I mean, the disc is out in 2 months. Is that right, Steve, or is it 3 months?
Probably in April.
April's where we think it's going to be. It'll just be on Blu-ray. Unfortunately,
and it won't have a Dolby Atmos soundtrack.
They could really kick it, and they could make that the announcement of a 4K release. And Steve I would hear him exploding from here. It would be like Krakatoa, but with something worse.
Tell you what, if they did do a 4K disc, it would look bloody amazing, because that film was shot at 6.5K, and I think it was also actually they did a 6.5K DI on it, so for its IMAX release. So. In a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, that would be an absolutely barnstorming disc. I mean, if they were going to pick one to launch on, that would be the one I'd pick.
Well, see, let's not rule it out. Let's get Withers unnaturally excited.
Would you still be as excited if it was a DTS-X track?
Oh yeah, I don't care about the as long as it's immersive audio, whether it's DTS-X or Atmos, I couldn't care less.
Or O3D.
Or a 3D will work for me too. I've got all three.
It's not very likely, though, is it? Really?
Very unlikely.
Yeah.
I mean, given that there's rumours certainly that, and I can believe this to be true, given they've done a lot of work with Dolby at the cinema in terms of Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos releases for Dolby Cinema releases with Disney. There's been rumours that they are going to adopt Dolby Vision on their discs, and one of the reasons that they've waited as long as they have is to wait for there to be an established Dolby Vision player base and TV base, which should happen this year, which is why we're talking about towards the end of this year seeing Disney get on board. That would also mean, obviously, that there's no reason why they have to, but that would suggest they would also adopt Dolby Atmos at the same time.
Okay, cool. That's kind of all we've got time for this week. We will come back to Rogue One probably when the disc is released and we all get a chance to see it yet again, this time in our homes. So we'll come back to that one. If you've got any of your suggestions or comments or whatever, please use the spoiler tag when replying on the forums in the thread. Let's not spoil it for anybody. Yes, I know it's been a few weeks at the cinema now and all sorts, but if on the public forum, please use the spoiler tags if you're going to discuss spoilers in the podcast forum. That's it for this week, so my thanks to Steve Withers.
Only the farmers won. We lost. We always lose.
And Ed Selley.
Do you ever get tired of hearing yourself talk?
Never. And Steve certainly doesn't. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course you can follow us, no you can't, plus you can also leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I read this out every week, I still get it wrong. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.